Oh, give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known his deeds among the peoples.
Sing to him, sing praises to him, tell all his wonderful works.
It's good to see you this morning and to welcome you on behalf of the Chapel by the Sea membership, especially if you're visiting. We're certainly happy that you're here and hope you enjoy the service and will come and worship with us again. Let me invite you also to participate in any of the programs that the chapel sponsors. And those who might be watching on the streaming, we welcome you also to this service of worship. The announcements are printed in the bulletin this morning. As usual, I'd like to call your special attention to several items. First of all, those of you who signed up for the Welcome Back Luncheon at the Palm Pavilion today, unfortunately, we cannot extend that. So if you have signed up, that's wonderful. We invite you over there. You can park here in the church parking lot, or you can drive over there if you don't or can't walk that far. Recognize that if you're parked across the street, those meters do go into effect at 12:30, and there are no exceptions. So if you're parked there and want to park here to go to the Palm Pavilion after church, be sure you move over and then walk on down there. Decorating for Christmas, we're going to be doing that on November 22nd, which is the Sunday before Thanksgiving, but it's also the Sunday before the beginning of Advent. So if you haven't signed up yet, I encourage you to do so. That will be right after church, and once the decorating is done, which doesn't usually take that long, we'll be decorating in here, Friendship Foyer, and in Chapel Hall. After that, a luncheon will be provided, so we invite you to come to that. If there are visiting young people here this morning who wish to participate in Sunday school, Mr. Cregan's right here in the front in the white shirt, so when he goes out, just follow him out. We'd love to have you, and so you would be going out at that time. It is marked in the bulletin. Stop Hunger Now. It's next Saturday. We're going to be meeting in the morning. It goes from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. We do need some strong younger folks who are willing to help carry in these bags of food. Again, we're planning to fill 15,000 bags of food for underdeveloped nations, developing nations, so that people who are hungry can eat. Also, we have reached $3,904 towards our $4,350 goal. So if you wish to contribute and haven't done that yet, if you wish to participate and haven't signed up yet, again, please do that after church in the Friendship Foyer, right to my right out there. Anybody, any ages are welcome. I've said before, the youngest we've ever had was 4 years old, and he was helpful. And we've had people in their 90s, so there's a job for everybody. Also, take a look at the different educational programs and non-trivials that are coming up. We do have a presentation from the National Cremation Society next Sunday. On Sunday the 29th, we're going to have a demonstration and a talk on yoga. So all kinds of different things. I'll leave it to you to read, and some other programs which are still in the planning stages. Remember, too, that if you come to the Sunday morning class with Tom Hartung, there will be none next Sunday, November 15th. So the rest of the announcements are there. Please do read them so you know what's going on. And again, welcome to the chapel.
This
this time to worship together in this house of the Lord. Let us sing praises to our God for all he has done and given. At this time and in this place, we thank God for his bounty. Let our worship begin. Let our worship begin. And God of glory, on your people pour your power. Grant us the strength we need to overcome all adversity, the faith we need to withstand all affliction, the love we need to retain all relationships, the commitment we need to accomplish our goals. Make us aware of the needs around us so that they can be met by you through us. Show us the proper paths of service you want us to travel, and then walk with us into each tomorrow. Now hear us again as we pray Jesus' prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. In gratitude for the many gifts we have received, let us be generous in our morning offering.
Good and gracious God, most of us are not farmers, and yet we relate to rural images in our worship. And so we see the world as your fields and ourselves as those who tend the flocks and harvest the crops. Indeed, we are told that we are the stewards to which the world has been given, and we are responsible for its well-being. In our moments of greatest honesty, we must admit that too often we have not done a very good job of it. In our greed and emphasis on our own comfort, we have polluted and destroyed not only the soil and the air and the water, but those other creatures who also inhabit this planet of ours and are also yours, even as we are. In our desire to have more and more, we have used resources exclusively for ourselves when they should be shared with others, especially those others who are the most vulnerable and poor. And in our concern for what is good for us in the now, we have neglected to preserve and conserve for the future, even a future to be inherited by those we care the most about. Show us new ways of thinking and doing, selfless and compassionate ways, and grant us the strength, the courage, the will to change, really change, into what you created us to be. Turn us into your hands, reaching out to those in need, and hear our hearts in the quietness of our personal meditation. Amen. Let me read to you this morning from the Gospel of Matthew. I'm reading from chapter 13, verses 24 through 30, and then 36 through 43. And this is one of Jesus' more well-known parables. So again, beginning with Matthew 13. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, An enemy has done this. The slave said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he replied, No, for in gathering the weeds you would uproot the wheat along with them. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples approached him, saying, Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. He answered, The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. And harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers. And they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen. Now, as we listen to the parable, let us think about it and maybe gain some more knowledge as the morning continues. Jesus told his listeners about a large landowner who, wanting to make the most of his holdings, planted his fields with the best seed that money could buy. But one night after the work was done and the laborers were sleeping, an enemy, another farmer perhaps, slipped onto the property and sowed noxious seeds everywhere, right in the middle of the good grain. A relatively short time later, when the plants began to grow, it became obvious what had happened. The wheat and the weeds were coming up together. Unfortunately, in their weed-like way, these began taking over the field. The field hands went to their boss to find out what to do. Should we uproot the weeds and throw them out, they asked. No, he said, at this point it is too hard to tell the difference between them. So if you do that, you will pull up the good along with the bad. Wait until harvest time. When everything is fully grown, the difference will be obvious, and then we can destroy the weeds and save the wheat. Now we know that Jesus' favorite way of teaching was through the telling of stories which we call parables, probably because they have a purpose and a moral. Some of them are more difficult to understand than others, but Jesus usually let his hearers draw their own conclusions regarding the meaning of what he was saying. The basic meaning of this parable seems clear enough, but later the disciples asked Jesus to explain it. He said that he was the landowner who sowed the good seed in his fields, the world. The wheat represented the righteous and the weeds represented the unrighteous. The enemy was the devil who brought evil into the world, and the world being the world, evil and good existed side by side, intermingled to such an extent that usually it was hard, if not impossible, to tell the difference. Indeed, it was so difficult that the separating could not be done until the end came, at which time, with the difference now obvious, the wheat and the weeds could be distinguished from each other so that the one could be saved and the other could be eliminated. Putting aside some of the allegory, let's observe that Jesus was right. That is the way the world is. For all the good that exists, right in the middle of it, we can find evil. For all the wheat that exists, right in the middle of it, we can find weeds. And these weeds might not necessarily be evil. They might merely be far less than they can and should be. Let's also narrow down our view a bit and see the fields as the church. The church where wheat and weeds exist side by side, and sometimes it takes forever to tell the difference. In this parable, we might tend to overlook the characters who are very important to the message. I'm referring to the slaves, the laborers, the field hands. And that's who we are, particularly in the church. We do our best, and sometimes we get discouraged and frustrated because all our best laid and well-thought plans go astray, perhaps because of the people that these plans involve and require. We've got a great project developed and begun, only to see it go down the tubes because of the half-hearted participation or non-participation of those who said they were on board, but now come up with all kinds of reasons why they cannot give their all after all. The chair of a church group is excited about what she has planned to enrich the spiritual lives of her organization's members, only to find that they can't wait to start figuring out how to keep others from using the church kitchen or the fellowship hall. A youth leader plans a wonderful retreat weekend and then finds that he or she spends most of the time keeping the boys from sneaking from their cabin to the girls' cabin, while the girls hope the boys succeed. That's when we field hands begin to wonder if it is our fault. What happened to our good sowing, our careful planning, our earnest praying? How can we get rid of the weeds that are ruining our fields? Jesus had a very pragmatic view. What he was saying was that that's just the way the world is. But it is hard for a farmer to see it in such a light. We want to get rid of those weeds, and we want to do it now. Again, using a church analogy, but we could also be talking with slightly different imagery and emphasis about a club or a group or an association. The following too often become our solutions. To keep the seed and the harvest pure and keep the weeds out, we may place restrictions on what members can and cannot do. No dancing, no smoking, no alcohol, no movies. All those worldly amusements that are determined to be evil by those of us who see ourselves as the good people and who, after all, make the rules. To keep the seed and the harvest pure and keep the weeds out, we may enforce doctrinal purity through rigidly defined statements of belief and inflexible dogma to which all must subscribe. To keep the seed and the harvest pure and the weeds out, we may deliberately work against growth and expansion, realizing that a small and tight-knit group can be better controlled, although the resulting inbreeding and exclusiveness can lead to feelings of superiority compared to those others who are on the outside. Jesus warned that this approach would not work, to say nothing of its being wrong. In so many words, he asked how the field hands thought they could accurately distinguish the weeds from the wheat, and pointed out that if they could not, they would be destroying the good with the bad. And I think he was also asking by implication, who are we to make that determination in the first place? Would we not be demonstrating our sinfulness by striving to so judge others? Certainly a very basic tenet of the chapel's theology and philosophy is that everyone is welcome, and nobody has the right to determine who is or isn't acceptable. Let's go a bit further while recognizing that every analogy has its limitations. The one here is that people are not plants. Wheat is always wheat and weeds are always weeds, but when it comes to people, well, a weed today could become wheat tomorrow. That weed-like person may become down the road a better plant than I can ever hope to be. In my zealousness to clean up the field, I might be highly premature in my judgment. Maybe what I am identifying as a weed may just be an immature blade of wheat. Or because people and plants are different, today's weed person could change into tomorrow's wheat person. So we farmers must not let our pride and zeal get in the way of the landholder's grace. We love to talk about hypocrisy. And of course the hypocrites, the weeds we find in the church are always the other guys. But you know, they're not so easy to spot. To be sure, almost anyone can pick out the person who makes pious protestations on Sunday morning, but with whom nobody would make a business deal on Monday, or the one who smiles sweetly in the narthex, but is a terror of unpleasantness in his or her own house. And even with such as these, we've got to be careful. Only God knows the characters, the personalities, the experiences, the circumstances which make them tick. Only God knows the personal equipment with which they labor and the personal struggles which have formed them. In this vein, it might be helpful to remember the two Civil War generals at a war zone meeting. When one noticed the sweat on the brow of the other, he observed, "Sir, if I was as frightened as you, I'd be ashamed to wear our uniform." To which the other replied, "Sir, if you were as frightened as I, you would have already left the field of battle." Even the most obvious weeds deserve compassion and understanding. Then there's the question of the fallibility of our human judgment in the first place. In the Middle East, there's a kind of weed that looks so much like wheat that even an experienced farmer cannot tell the difference in their early stages. Undoubtedly, this is the plant Jesus had in mind when telling his parable. And I think we might extend such thinking to our views of church and social organizations. Perhaps it is a tribute to Christianity that many of its teachings have been adopted by our culture, though without the religious overtones. So it is that the average nice person wants to be a good neighbor who maintains pleasant relationships with just about everyone while being involved in worthwhile causes. No wonder then that at least some of the ethical teachings of the Christian faith have become virtually synonymous with Western society. Thus, if the cross is left out of the story as a means of redemption and a way of life, suburban gentility becomes almost indistinguishable from our traditional image of a Christian existence. But except for the religious emphases, there might be little difference between a faith community and a country club or a social stratum. It leads to difficulties if even in the church we associate Christianity with particular cultural patterns. Too often we go to church where the people just like us go to church. And what draws us there has less to do with the theology being espoused than with the social mores and interests of the others who are there. There are Christians who cannot conceive of real Christians who would wear white socks with a suit. And there are Christians who cannot conceive of real Christians who would dress well and act uppity. So we judge others as wheat or weeds based on our concepts of legitimacy and from our social and cultural viewpoints. Therefore, it's best that, as Jesus recommended, we stay out of the judging business, because in view of our own social and intellectual and personal preconceptions, our judgmental determinations will always be fallible. Finally, we ourselves tend to be composites of wheat and weeds. Our souls are like the fields in which a great deal of seed is sown. We hope that most of it is good, but we also must recognize that from time to time some bad gets mixed in. Some of our own choosing, and much when our defenses are down and we are somehow vulnerable. So we are not faultless when it comes to the way we think and act and live. Additionally, the seeds we sow in the world through our words and deeds might also be mixed. Our motives can be legitimately questioned because there are times when they might not be pure and selfless. If our motives are mixed, then the seeds that are sown as a result will also be mixed. When all is said and done, we must remember that while we are workers in the fields belong to God, and we are only sowing seeds and tending plants on His behalf and at His direction. If we seed weeds among the wheat, we must follow Jesus' advice and leave them alone for a while. Sooner or later they will reveal themselves and the difference will be obvious. That doesn't mean we don't do all we can to tend the fields and help the wheat grow. But if it is given the chance, it will be strong enough to withstand any and every intrusion. And it's up to God to, in some way, separate the chaff from the grain. In the final analysis, the power and the privilege are His. Our job is to hang in there, to do the best we can, and try to keep the weeds from corrupting our thoughts and our actions and our souls and our lives. Ultimately, the harvest will come, and it will be good. as we go out into the fields of the world, may it be with the intention not to look for weeds, but to become the best wheat that we can be. And in our efforts, may the Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace, both now and forevermore. Amen.